On January 8, 1943, a hotel maid pushed past a Do Not Disturb sign and entered room 3327 of the New Yorker Hotel. Inside, she found the man who had electrified the world, Nikola Tesla. He had died the day before, alone, at the age of 86. But the story doesn't end there.
Not even close. In the days that followed, officials from the U.S. government showed up. They weren't there to pay their respects. They were there to take everything. They sealed his belongings and began the process of seizing every last piece of his research. They treated the estate of this elderly inventor not like the legacy of a hero, but like the arsenal of a captured spy. They confiscated nearly 80 trunks of schematics and writings. Decades of work from one of history's most brilliant minds. So what was in those papers that had the American government so worried in the middle of a world war? What secrets were they so desperate to find that the story is still shrouded in mystery today? The official version is a simple story of wartime caution.
But for many, the truth is far more complex, pointing to a deliberate effort to bury technologies that could have changed the world forever. To get why the government was so interested in a dead inventor's files, you first have to understand the man himself.
Nikola Tesla was a true genius, but he was also profoundly weird. He didn't just think of inventions. He hallucinated them. He claimed he could build entire machines in his mind, run them for weeks to test for wear and tear, and then fix the flaws, all without ever touching a piece of metal. But this brilliance came with a cost. He was obsessive. He had a paralyzing fear of germs, refused to touch human hair, and despised pearl jewelry so much he would refuse to speak to women wearing it. He did everything in sets of 3. If he walked around a block once, he had to do it 2 more times. He was a man vibrating on a frequency no one else could quite hear. Born in 1856 in what is now Croatia, Tesla arrived in the United States in 1884, with just a few cents in his pocket and a mind buzzing with revolutionary ideas. He quickly landed a job with the famous inventor Thomas Edison, but that partnership was doomed from the start. They were both titans of invention, but they were polar opposites. Edison championed direct current, or DC. It worked, but his low-voltage system was incredibly inefficient for sending power over long distances. It needed a noisy, smoking power station on nearly every city block, just to keep the lights on. Tesla, on the other hand, had a vision for something way better. Alternating current, or AC. He knew that with AC, he could step up the voltage to move power over hundreds of miles with almost no energy loss, and then step it down for safe use in homes and factories. This argument over the future of electricity kicked off one of the great tech rivalries of the era, the War of the Currents. After splitting with Edison, Tesla found a key ally in George Westinghouse, an industrialist who immediately saw the potential in Tesla's AC system. Together they went head-to-head with Edison's DC empire. Edison, terrified of losing his massive investment, didn't just argue, he fought dirty. He launched a brutal smear campaign to convince the public that AC was a killer current. He paid local children to collect stray dogs and cats, which he then publicly electrocuted, using Tesla's AC power to prove it was lethal. He even secretly helped engineer the first electric chair, hoping the public would associate Tesla's system with death. But in the end, better technology won. Tesla and Westinghouse's AC system was chosen to light up the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago. It was a dazzling spectacle that proved the sea was safe, reliable, and superior. A few years later, their system was used to harness the awesome power of Niagara Falls, creating one of the first large-scale hydroelectric power plants in the world. The world we live in today, with electricity delivered right to our homes, runs on the principles Tesla fought for. But he didn't stop there. Tesla was a relentless innovator. In 1891, he invented the Tesla coil, a device that creates stunning arcs of high-voltage electricity. This wasn't just for show. It was a crucial step in his experiments with wireless communication. While many inventors contributed to the birth of radio, Tesla's work was so fundamental that in 1943 the U.S. Supreme Court invalidated some of Guglielmo Marconi's key patents, affirming that Tesla's work had come first.
He was a man of firsts. When remote control was still a fantasy, Tesla demonstrated one of the world's first radio-controlled vehicles, a small boat, to a stunned crowd at Madison Square Garden in 1898. He was among the first in the U.S. to experiment with X-rays, even capturing early images and warning of their potential dangers.
In so many ways, he was a man who saw the 21st century while still living in the 19th. But as the world marched towards its second Great War, the laughter stopped. Whispers started to spread about a new, terrifying invention emerging from the mind of this aging genius. Tesla called it Teleforce, but the press gave it a name that stuck, the death ray. Tesla wasn't shy about it.
He claimed he had designed a particle beam weapon so powerful it could wipe out entire armies. He told reporters it could send concentrated beams of particles through the free air, striking down 10,000 enemy airplanes at a distance of 200 miles.
It wasn't a ray in the science fiction sense, like a laser. It was something far more visceral. He described a nozzle that would fire microscopic pellets of tungsten or mercury at 48 times the speed of sound.
In theory, it could act as an impenetrable shield for any nation that possessed it, a great wall of China made of invisible energy that would make the very concept of war obsolete. This was the situation when Tesla died in January 1943. The United States was deep in the throes of World War II, a conflict being fought on the absolute cutting edge of physics. Radar was spotting planes in the dark, jet engines were being tested, and the Manhattan Project was secretly racing to split the atom.
In this high-stakes environment, the idea that a genius inventor might have left behind blueprints for a superweapon was a risk no government could take. Tesla, desperate for funding, had apparently tried to pitch Teleforce to several world powers, including Great Britain and the Soviet Union. The U.S. government was terrified by one specific possibility. What if Tesla's plans ended up in the hands of the Nazis? The moment his heart stopped beating, his knowledge became a matter of national security.
Within days, officials from a government agency called the Office of Alien Property, or OAP, arrived at the New Yorker hotel.
Their presence was unusual. The OAP existed to seize property belonging to enemies of the state during wartime. But Tesla wasn't an enemy. He was a naturalized American citizen who had lived in the country for 60 years.
The legal justification was flimsy but effective. Tesla had died without a will, and his closest living relative was his nephew, Sava Kosanovich.
Kosanovich was the Yugoslav ambassador, and since Yugoslavia was currently occupied by Axis forces, the government claimed that handing over Tesla's papers to him was too risky. Acting on this technicality, they moved in. This wasn't a dramatic door-kicking raid like you see in movies. It was a cold, bureaucratic seizure. The OAP, with the FBI watching from the shadows, sealed room 3327. They hired a storage company to pack up everything. They took it all. They carted away technical papers, sketchbooks, and black notebooks. They took his correspondence and his strange, custom-built testing equipment. In total, they hauled away about 80 trunks and crates, nearly a century of genius packed into wooden boxes. Among that mountain of documents, the government wasn't just looking for the death ray. They were looking for the details of an even bigger, more world-changing project that Tesla had abandoned decades earlier, the Wardenclyffe Tower. Long before the paranoia of World War II, Tesla had started his most ambitious experiment.
In 1901, backed by the legendary financier J.P. Morgan, Tesla began construction on a massive facility in Shoreham, Long Island. At its center stood a colossal wooden tower, 187 feet tall, topped with a strange mushroom-shaped metal dome. Beneath it, a shaft plunged 120 feet into the earth, grounding the tower into the bedrock.
Morgan thought he was funding a wireless communication system, a way to send stock quotes and telegrams across the Atlantic to compete with Marconi. But Tesla's real plan was far more radical. He didn't just want to send information, he wanted to send power. Tesla believed the Earth itself was a giant electrical conductor, like a tuning fork.
He theorized that by pumping extremely high voltages into the ground at the right frequency, he could create resonant waves that would allow anyone, anywhere on the globe, to pull electricity right out of the dirt. Imagine a world with no power lines,
no grid, and no coal plants. A world where ships in the middle of the ocean, planes in the sky, and homes in the most remote villages could tap into a global reservoir of clean, wireless energy. This was the utopia Tesla was trying to build. But the project was doomed. Legend says J.P. Morgan pulled his money when he realized the system's fatal flaw. It wasn't a technical flaw. It was an economic one. As the famous story goes, Morgan asked Tesla a simple question. If anyone can draw power from the Earth, where do I put the meter? If the energy was free and accessible to everyone, there was no way to charge for it. Morgan was a capitalist, not a philanthropist. He cut the funding. Tesla tried desperately to keep the dream alive, but without money, the machinery fell silent. In 1917, fearing the tower might be used by German spies, the U.S. government encouraged its destruction. The magnificent Wardenclyffe Tower, a monument to a future that never arrived, was dynamited and sold for scrap. To many, this wasn't just a business failure. It was the first act in a century-long suppression of Tesla's work, a move to protect the powerful energy monopolies that would lose everything if his vision of global, wireless power ever became real. They turned to a brilliant electrical engineer from MIT who was already working on advanced radar technology for the war effort. His name was John G. Trump. And yes, he was Donald Trump's uncle. John G. Trump was given a daunting task. He had 3 days to sift through the entire collection of Tesla's life work. The FBI and military intelligence waited on his every word, terrified he might find the designs for the particle beam weapon. After his review, Trump's conclusion was blunt. He reported that Tesla's papers were mostly speculative, philosophical, and of a promotional character. He told the FBI that the notes contained no new sound workable principles that could be used to build a weapon. In one famous moment during the investigation, the agents found a specific box that had been rumored to hold the working prototype of the death ray. With high tension, they opened it. Inside, John G. Trump didn't find a futuristic beam weapon. He found a standard, decades-old piece of electrical testing equipment called a resistance box. With Trump's assessment in hand, the government officially closed the case. Tesla's papers were deemed to have no national security value. After a long legal process, the majority of the collection was released to his nephew, Sava Kosanovic. In 1952, the documents were shipped to Yugoslavia, where they became the core of the Nikola Tesla Museum in Belgrade. On the surface, the story ends right there. The government took a reasonable wartime precaution, found nothing important, and returned the property. But that clean-cut story never sat right with researchers. If the papers were truly just the philosophical ramblings of a senile old man, why did the FBI keep a classified file on Tesla for decades after his death? Starting in the 1970s, researchers began filing Freedom of Information Act requests, demanded to see the government's records on the inventor. Getting those files was a long and frustrating battle. The FBI delayed, denied, and obfuscated for years. When the files were finally forced into the public domain, they raised more questions than they answered. Many of the pages were heavily redacted. Thick black lines covered names, dates, and entire paragraphs of text. This created a massive contradiction. If John G. Trump was right in 1943 that Tesla's work had no practical military value, why was the government's file on him still considered sensitive information 40 years later? This disconnect is the central pillar of the modern Tesla conspiracy theory. It suggests that Trump's report wasn't the final word, but the first act of a cover-up. So, why did the FBI really seize Nikola Tesla's papers? The simple answer is wartime paranoia. The U.S. was in a desperate fight against fascism and couldn't risk even a tiny chance of a potential superweapon falling into enemy hands. The seizure was a logical, if heavy-handed, precaution, but the more complex and far more tantalizing answer has captivated people for generations. This theory suggests the government seized Tesla's work not just to keep it from its enemies, but to keep it from everyone. It suggests that hidden in those chaotic notes weren't just plans for a death ray, but blueprints for a practical free energy device.
the missing key that would have made the dream of Wardenclyffe a reality.
In this version of the story, the government, possibly nudged by powerful corporate interests, locked these secrets away to protect the multi-trillion-dollar global energy industry, which depends on the very system of metered power that Tesla wanted to make obsolete. There is no definitive public proof to support this.
No declassified document has ever revealed a working free energy device or a functional death ray. John G. Trump's technical assessment remains the official verdict. And yet, the mystery lives on. It lives in the redacted lines of FBI files and in the story of Wardenclyffe, a tower that promised free power to the world before it was torn down. And it grows with every new generation that rediscovers the story of Nikola Tesla, the brilliant, tragic genius who dreamed of a future we still haven't quite reached. But maybe the biggest secret Tesla left us wasn't a death ray or a tower.
It was a warning, he said. If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. For decades, we thought he was talking about electricity.
But a NASA-backed study suggests he might have been talking about us. Researchers have found that 98% of young children are born with a specific brainwave frequency that allows for genius-level intuition and effortless learning. It's the same Theta state Tesla likely operated in. But here's the terrifying part. Modern life, stress, noise, and the education system effectively switches this frequency off. By the time we are adults, only 2% of us still have access to it. We didn't just lose Tesla's papers, we lost the frequency that made them possible.
But what if you could turn it back on? There is a leaked 7-minute soundwave ritual that claims to force your brain back into that dormant Tesla state. It doesn't involve studying or meditation.
It uses the exact vibration science Tesla was obsessed with to wake up the part of your brain that's been asleep for years. I've managed to find a video that explains the NASA research behind this soundwave, and I've pinned the link in the comments and description below.
This isn't just about getting smarter. It's about reclaiming the mental power that was stolen from you. Click that link right now to watch the presentation before it gets taken down, and see what happens when you finally get back on the right frequency. Thanks for watching.